All right, recording is on. Well, good morning. I'm Tom. This is the Ketogenic Fasting Project, and our guest today is Nevada Gray, all the way from the other side of the country. How are you this morning?
I'm doing awesome, Thomas. How are you?
I'm good. Haven't been up very long, so I'm just getting my brain going.
That's okay. I'm having an ice water myself.
Oh, yeah, that'll help sometimes. It'd probably help a little more if I jumped in the ice water than if I drank it, though.
Yes, absolutely.
So, do you want to just tell us a little bit about your story and what happened to you and how you recovered?
Sure. So what happened to me in 2016 was I had a rare spinal cord injury called Cauda equina syndrome, and that resulted from a herniated disc that came out central and crushed my Cauda equina, which is the horsetail of the spinal cord. So my herniation occurred at the L5-S1 level. Prior to this happening, I had struggled with lifelong PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which resulted in some metabolic issues that I was having as far as a prediabetes diagnosis. I was struggling with being overweight. I was struggling with irregular menstrual cycles, all the pleasant cosmetic problems that come along with this condition. And I was basically just looking for something to help me clear up this condition or manage it, lose weight. So in the process of going to nursing school and pharmacy school, I was learning all of the standard guidelines of how these conditions are treated. I had 2 nutrition classes. So I thought I'm going to start implementing what's in the nutrition classes, and just started feeling worse and gaining more weight. And after pharmacy school, I discovered the paleo diet. So I started doing the paleo diet. I started training in the gym. Lost 50 pounds. I was at my heaviest, around 220 pounds. So I lost 50 pounds. I was happy with that. It was hard 50 pounds to lose. I was still overweight by, basic standards in healthcare. I was still classified as obese, and just, struggling with this. And I became sick one day. I started not feeling well. And I had to have a spinal tap in emergency room because I'm a person that never goes to the doctor. So I developed headaches, fever. I had swollen glands. They thought I had meningitis. So I had a spinal tap occur in my lumbar spine that caused a CSF leak to happen, which is a tear that happens and the spinal fluid gets where it's not supposed to, and it causes these awful spinal headaches. And I had a blood patch in that area. I still continued after this. My diagnosis ended up being mono, by the way. So I still continued training in the nutrition and the paleo diet after this occurred. And for a year and a half, I struggled with really bad back pain and headaches after this. But I was still trying to do the best I could to improve my condition. And one day at work, I started developing severe sciatica, the worst back pain. It had reached a critical mass to the point where I had to use a motorized cart to get up to my car that night after my shift. Wow. I still had a few more days to work and decided I just need to get through this. I'm a person that never calls in sick. I just need to get through this and then just get to my doctor and find out what is going on with my back.
Right.
Long story short, the next morning I woke up paralyzed from the waist down. I couldn't move my legs. I had numbness. I was incontinent of my bladder, and I just started calling everybody in my telephone until somebody picked up to come and pick me up because I realized I needed to get myself to a high-level medical center. So I went to the high-level medical center. The paramedics had to get me out of the car in the parking lot because I could not walk. I was rushed into an emergency MRI, and they found that I had what they called huge mass effect at my L5-S1. So they weren't quite sure if it was a tumor or if it was a disc herniation or what was going on with my back. So I was transported to an even higher level medical center that had neurosurgery. And that's where I was diagnosed with Cauda equina syndrome from central disc herniation. So the annulus, which is the layer that keeps your disc in place, it had ripped from side to side. So my disc just shot straight out and crushed the Cauda equina of my spinal cord, which is, again, the horsetail of nerves that hang off the spinal cord, because the spinal cord ends around the lumbar region of L1, L2, and then you have this huge tangle of nerves. And that's what was being crushed by the disc material. And those nerves go to the bowel and bladder, to your legs, and to your feet. So from the waist down, I was numb. It felt like my limbs were asleep. I lacked reflexes. My feet weren't moving up and down. I had saddle anesthesia, which is a huge red flag for a condition, for the Cauda equina diagnosis. A lot of patients have the saddle anesthesia. I had that. And I was in the most excruciating pain I had ever been in my life. So this required emergency surgery. So I had a microdiscectomy where they removed the disc material off of my Cauda equina the best that they could. And then my recovery after that took a good 2 years. I'm 3.5 years out now. I still get stronger every day. I have almost all my sensory back except for 2 toes, which I lack sensory and motor. But I did get back my sensory and motor, and by all means have had what many consider a full recovery from this condition. So I used, basically 4 pillars to recover from this. I used restorative sleep. I used nutrition in the form of a ketogenic and now carnivore diet. And I used fitness, which is function in the form of functional training with the philosophy of Stuart McGill. And then I also used mindset.
So how did you find those 4 pillars?
So I found those 4 pillars. Actually, my journey started because I was discharged with home services, and I Googled my condition after my doctor told me to do not Google this condition, and I completely flipped out.
Yeah.
Because I was not seeing anything positive about it. Cauda equina syndrome is a very rare condition to be diagnosed with. There's not much in the literature. It affects 1 in 100,000 patients. In some of the papers, it was 1 in 2 million, depending on where the paper was published. So most physicians never see a case of this in their career. Spinal cord injury in itself is rare. Depending on, and the condition and the diagnosis is based on the level of injury in the cord. So there are different names for it. So it was very rare. So there wasn't a lot out there. Most patients that were studied, it was timed surgery or bladder, not studied past 2 years. Not many studies. There was a ton of case reports. So I was looking through the case reports. These patients weren't followed up. I just didn't know what to do. I started panicking. I called my neurosurgeon and he said, stay off Google. I think you can have a full recovery. We're going to give it our best shot. So I called a few friends and they told me, why don't you go on YouTube and find people that beat the odds, watch their videos and encourage yourself. So that's what I did. And one of the first videos that popped up was of Sean Stevenson, who is the host of his own podcast, The Model Health Show. He also wrote a book called Sleep Smarter, but he cured himself from degenerative disc and spine disease, which I thought by all means was something that was not reversible. But he had great success in doing this, and he went on to live an amazing life, create his business, write his book, and empower so many people in back health to fix their backs. So I reached out to him through Instagram. I created an Instagram account. He gave me some resources to start with, as well as places that he shared his story. So I started implementing his strategy immediately. And through implementing his strategy as far as correcting muscle imbalances, getting restorative sleep, getting hydration, I found the ketogenic diet and started implementing the ketogenic diet from what I was learning from my friend Vanessa Spina, the ketogenic girl. I found her on Google and reached out to her for help in implementing a ketogenic diet because I felt at this time my entire life depended on doing this diet correctly. So the reason I started implementing these strategies was based on some of the research that I was reading. So one of the points that Sean Stevenson speaks to that I think is extremely important is when you have a catastrophic injury and you have an illness or you're diagnosed with something, your body will give you cues on what to do to heal itself. You just have to listen to it. And this was something that Sean Stevenson spoke to, and I'm so glad I started paying attention very early on. The first thing I noticed was I was exhausted. The body gets very tired when something happens because it wants you to sleep in a restorative manner to get into the deepest level of sleep possible so the immune system can kick in so that you can start healing. The other thing is you're not going to be hungry because the body wants to put everything into the immune system, into fixing itself. So I wasn't really that hungry. And when I was hungry, I was craving protein and fat, which were unusual cravings for me at the time, but they were the building blocks that I needed for my nerves and for my spine to heal. So my body started craving what it needed to repair itself. So I started listening to this. So I put myself in a very strict sleep schedule. I was sleeping when this first happened, 16 hours a day. I was so tired.
Wow.
I started drinking a lot of water because the discs have no blood supply. And in order to get the raw material to start healing themselves, this occurs through diffusion, usually during restorative sleep. So you have to be drinking enough water for the raw materials that you're eating in the form of the proteins and fats to be able to get to where it needs to go to start repairing and turning on the factors and all the mechanisms in the body that are needed for the nerve regeneration and for the discs and the spine. So I started hydrating. I drank around a gallon of water a day, which actually helped me recover my bladder, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Yes. And then I was doing restorative sleep, and I started working on correcting my muscle imbalances that occurred. So the root cause of my diagnosis of Cauda equina syndrome and the herniated disc, I believe occurred due to, number one, the diet I was eating prior to the herniation, especially with what I've learned recently regarding oxalates. I believe that my diet possibly destabilized the structure with the disc. I was training in a way that I did not have the proper core strength to be training the way that I was training. So I was continuously doing repetitive motions that were malnourished. And when I say malnourished, meant that I was moving in a way that was not healthy for my spine. So I had a repetitive motion going. And then I had the spinal tap and blood patch. So I believe that was a perfect storm for what caused the herniation. So in understanding this, I could start correcting my back. So I started with the correction of the muscle imbalances, really working on my core and my glutes. And then whatever muscles were weakened by the injury, I focused on strengthening those. And then the muscles that were overworked, I focused on foam rolling to keep them loose. So I foam rolled out the overworked muscles and I strengthened the weakened muscles. And over time, those muscles came back into balance, or as much balance as possible. I'm always working on muscle imbalances in my posture because I pay attention to it now. But through doing that, I brought my muscles into balance so that they were working in the way that they were supposed to. Because a lot of times with our posture and our movement, we don't pay attention to it. We take it for granted. But we're actually doing repetitive movements that can lead to injury in our daily activities. So if you're doing too much twisting, repetitive twisting at work, you're putting yourself at risk for a disc herniation. If you're doing repetitive bending without hip hinging, you're injuring your spine. If you're doing repetitive sit-ups over time, which Stuart McGill has a great book called Back Mechanic for the layperson, and explains how these repetitive movements lead to injury and tears and breakdown of the disc, of the annulus, which can lead to annular tears, which is that annulus tearing, which is a root cause for why many people have back pain. They take a while to heal. If you continue the repetitive motion, the annulus doesn't heal, and then you can possibly herniate a disc. And then the disc material comes out. It can impact the nerve root, so it can cause pressure on the nerve root, which causes nerve pain. You get a chemical reaction that occurs from all the inflammation. So this is why it's so important to pay attention to movement. And these are all things I took for granted prior to my injury, but something I think of every day. Just sitting right now, I'm making sure, I tend to lean forward a little bit, and I just caught myself as I was explaining this, and I'm just like, I move back.
Yeah, I'm leaning forward right now.
I need to have my posture and my back in neutral. So that's one thing that I'm very conscious of now when I'm training, is that I train with my back in neutral, which is the natural curve of the spine. And I always make sure that I have my core engaged and that I'm engaging in diaphragmatic breathing, where I know that my core is engaged prior to doing any exercise. And that's a tip I have for everybody, is prior to doing anything, start out slow, start out building your endurance, and then as you build your core strength, then add on lifting and exercise, but always make sure that you have your core engaged, and build your glutes, because that's what's going to create that muscle fusion around your spine. That's going to keep your lumbar spine stable.
Yeah, I used to have some really serious back pain, and earlier this year I had a whole body scan, and even though some of the discs were still somewhat compressed, it looked like they'd recovered.
Yes.
And that's probably, it was probably maybe 5, 6, 7, even 10 years ago, the last time I'd had a scan done. And that I have not had any back pain since 2017. And I used to get sciatica so bad I'd drag a foot behind me for like a month at a time. I couldn't roll over in bed so it's amazing how much recovery even somebody like me can have. And then it's frightening to think that, a disc rupture like that could turn into the situation you had. That's just frightening.
Yes, it's actually very rare that it happens, but there are some red flags to actually watch for. And I'm huge into provider and patient education to these red flags. And one of the red flags is the back pain starts becoming severe, the worst back pain you've ever had in your life. You may notice that you start having trouble with your bowel and bladder. One of the hallmark signs of Cauda equina syndrome is you lose the ability to feel the sensation that you have to urinate, that you have to empty your bladder. So your bladder fills to capacity, and then you end up becoming incontinent of your bladder or incontinent of your bowel because you lose the sensation that you have to go. And that can actually occur over time. They're actually slow onset of Cauda equina. So if you're starting to have trouble with bowel and bladder, in addition to having back pain, or you're starting to have trouble with sexual function, if you're starting to notice that you're having, sorry, that was my dryer. If you're starting to notice that you're having severe sciatica that's not going away, if you're starting to have foot drop, if you're starting to have spasticity in your legs, if you're starting to have saddle anesthesia, these are red flags that something more could be going on with your spine. And your Cauda equina that really, really need to be looked at urgently, that require an MRI, just to rule out a risk for Cauda equina, because sometimes, depending on how the disc is herniating, they will take you into surgery as soon as possible, where they can prevent Cauda equina from happening, the Cauda equina syndrome from happening. Or if it is happening, a prompt diagnosis is of the utmost importance. And how how they diagnose that is through an emergency MRI. And then surgery, the best outcomes have been shown in the studies are between 24 and 48 hours. So prompt surgery is needed. It's one of the only surgical emergencies out there. And a neurosurgeon is usually the best person to perform that surgery to decompress the Cauda equina as soon as possible. Now, with that, peripheral nerves are able to regenerate. And there's a lot of exciting science regarding this, because I was always under the impression that nerves could not regenerate, that once they were injured, they were injured. And I learned quite a bit through my recovery that peripheral nerves are a little more forgiving than the nerves of the central nervous system. And they're myelinated by different cells than the central nervous system, which are called Schwann cells. And there's this whole classification system. Seddon is one of the more famous ones, of when the nerve is injured in a specific way, what are the chances of it regenerating? Was it due to ischemia, where the nerve lacked getting the supplies that it needs to survive? Was it due to being cut? What was still intact of the nerve structure? Because if critical components are still intact, then the Schwann cells actually can revert back to almost a stem cell like state, which is pretty fascinating, and can start clearing the debris of the damage and inflammation and start sprouting and regenerating and connecting to the other nerve that it was separated from, which is extremely fascinating. Who knew that this could happen?
Right.
The question was how do we optimize this to happen? And there's been some exciting studies, and they're still working this out, and I'm by no means an expert in it, but there are some exciting studies looking at fasting, which help create these factors. Also, there's some studies in mice with nerve regeneration and ketosis. How this is optimized, it's still being worked out, but it's been shown that there's something happening here where the factors of regeneration are occurring in these states, and nerve regeneration can happen. My neurosurgeon told me that with the peripheral nerves, and my injury was classified as ischemia because they were crushed, so the nerves were basically stunned. So they could still rewire around that as long as the nerve didn't die. And he did not see, cell death. The nerves were all swollen and stunned, but he said, I think that, these can come back.
Wow.
So in certain states of fasting and ketosis, I think that something is definitely occurring that allowed for my nerves to recover in this situation. So it's extremely interesting, and I follow the science with it, and there's some different pathways that they've discovered, some different cofactors that are essential. But like I said, it depends on what is still intact with the nerve, and these nerves can regenerate between 1 millimeter to 5 millimeters a day, depending on the size of them. So we calculated, based on my height, it would be a little over 400 days. And around 400 days, we'd get an idea of what was regenerating and what would come back. So that's a little over a year. And he was right. Around that time frame, I had gotten back quite a bit of sensory and motor. In the second year, I got back even more, especially when I went more carnivore and very strict. I got rid of all vegetables. I started getting back even more in terms of strength. So I feel that in optimizing my nutrition through a ketogenic diet and a carnivore diet, in my opinion, I created an environment where I optimize nerve regeneration occurring and nerve recovery with this, because damaged nerves have altered glucose metabolism. We see this in other neurodegenerative conditions. So if my nerves were stunned, they probably were not deriving energy properly from glucose. So our other fuel source that we can optimize is through the ketones. So that's why I gave my nerves an alternate fuel source in the form of ketosis. The other thing that we've learned, which is extremely interesting, and some great resources on this are two amazing women, Dr. Georgia Ede and Sally Norton.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ede talks about the nightshades,
Mm-hmm.
which I was eating prior to this. I was eating a nightshade diet. I was also eating a semi-high oxalate diet because I thought, vegetables were important to health. I was eating all this, when I was doing the paleo diet. I was even eating some of the oxalate foods when I first learned keto.
Mm-hmm.
And
Too. Lots of spinach.
yes,
And almonds too.
and the most radical thing to me, which blew my mind, were the neurotoxic chemicals that these plants were making that could actually injure the nerves. For example, the nightshades have the glycoalkaloids, which can affect acetylcholine, which can affect motor transmission. So when I was reading this, I was like, oh my goodness, I can't, I need to eliminate this because this could be affecting my motor transmission. As far as the oxalates, I'm actually going to post this on my Instagram, and I think Sally's going to write a commentary about it, but there's a paper that's out there that actually shows in patients that had surgery for disc herniations, oxalate deposits in the disc. And they hypothesized that the deposit of the oxalate crystals could destabilize the annulus that holds the disc in place, but also destabilize the disc and maybe a root cause for herniation. So this, to me, it is as radical as it sounds. How many people have back pain and spontaneous herniation that could potentially be due to a high oxalate diet? So
you see these pictures of oxalate crystal heart muscle in the brain.
Yes.
And you find out, well, maybe it's happening in the spine too. That's chilling.
Yes. So this was radical. The whole thing about vegetables actually, completely blew my mind. And the more I read about it, the more I understand how a carnivore diet most likely optimized my recovery from Cauda equina and getting back my motor and sensory and walking again, and my strength and my overall health. And as a side effect of getting my health back, I lost weight. I'm at my lowest possible weight that I am now. I have the best body composition I've ever had. I also put PCOS, my polycystic ovarian syndrome, in remission. I have no problems with the condition now. Everything has improved on every level. My ultrasound over a year ago had no cysts on my ovaries. I have not had any problems living this lifestyle. So I feel that there is definitely something to this. And in my opinion, it's an option that people can utilize. I believe in a recovery from Cauda equina syndrome, or even in polycystic ovarian syndrome, where other treatments aren't working. Try a nutritional change and see if you're a person that could be extremely sensitive to carbohydrates, because we know that insulin resistance is being hypothesized as a root cause of polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Yeah, I hear that almost every day.
Yes.
People reversing that. And, I almost lost the fingers on my left hand back in the 90s, and it broke all the bones in the hand and back together. And I have a lot of scar tissue. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, wow.
And I noticed the last year or so that my hand is, I lost feeling in my fingers, of course, which seems to be coming back. But also now my hand is less sensitive, like when I'm gripping things, because the combination of the bones fusing back together in the irregular shape with all the scar tissue, when I'd grab something, the palm of my hand was very sensitive. And now it seems like when I grab stuff, like when I'm lifting a dumbbell or something, I don't notice the discomfort I used to notice, and my fingers seem to be more sensitive to touch. So. Yeah, it's even after all this time, it seems like I've made a big leap forward. So, in my theory, both with my back getting better and my hand getting better, I've kind of had it in my mind that this might very well be an issue of tissue quality. Injured more easily because the tissue quality is poor, and then you go on a carnivore diet or a diet rich in meat, and you're eating more collagen, maybe more connective tissues, obviously more proteins or amino acids, and of course lots of fats and stuff like that. And I suspect that high level of animal product can prevent injury by keeping the tissue quality high, but also help you regenerate tissues.
Yes, because it's so important that you're feeding your body the building blocks to heal. Absolutely. And a good fuel source. For me, I still tend to do, as far as my macros, I do a higher fat. I find that I feel better on the higher fat. My body composition, I'm happy with. And I also feel that it's important for my overall nerve health. So that's what I tend to adhere to. A lot of people, they ask me all the time, what's the best macro ratio? And I always tell them the best macro ratio is the perfect balance, that you're getting the building blocks that you need, but also that you're getting the fuel, because the fuel is important. You can't sustain yourself on protein alone. You need to have the fuel source.
Mm-hmm.
To find the balance of where you're getting enough fuel, where you feel the mental clarity, you're not fatigued, you have energy, your body's functioning optimized the way that it's supposed to. And, in combination with the protein that you're eating, or if you're doing a low carb, that you're just getting enough fuel for all that to happen. That's the most important thing. So you kind of have to figure out what that balance is. And, we call it metabolic flexibility, and it's true. You have to figure out how do you feel, the best. I feel the best on a slightly higher fat. So I tend to do the PKD, which the Paleo Medicina
Mm-hmm.
group has put out. It's a wonderful protocol and a great guidance document for patients. It's on their website, paleomedicina.com. They have some amazing case studies, such as reversal of Crohn's, management of type 1 diabetes, that they've written about, and they've put their whole protocol for what they used in these patients. So that's a great resource for patients.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
I consulted with them about a month and a half ago.
Yes.
So I had arthritis really bad, and it went away very quickly. But I
Mm-hmm.
still had psoriasis. It was bad. I don't know if it's even visible, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just now starting to scar over, and it's almost.
Yeah.
I'm eating a ratio of 2-to-1 of fat
2 to
over
1.
protein. Yeah,
Yep.
and I'm
That's the one
also
I
eating
do.
liver every day, and bone
Mm-hmm.
marrow and brains. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I wanted to kind of circle back. You said you lost that initial 50 pounds, and you've obviously lost a lot more since then. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing to talk about, because a lot of people, they go low carb or keto and they lose that first 40, 50, 60 pounds, and then they plateau.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if I plug my numbers into, say, Fitbit or Chronometer or Keto Gains or something like that, it shows me burning 3,500, 4,500, 5,500 calories a day, depending on my activity, but I can't eat anywhere near that level and get leaner.
Mm-hmm.
And on the PKD diet, I'm probably eating closer to like 2,500 to 2,000 calories a day, and I have to get it down that low in order to get leaner. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, eating over that makes it really easy to put muscle on.
Mm-hmm.
You can go in the gym and sit a PR almost every week at at my level. So, but having to back off that and make sure that fat ratio, and I check the my glucose every morning and my ketones every morning, and it was I could get ketone levels like 3 and 4 um, during the day, no problem. But to keep it over 2 in the morning, and to keep the glucose, I haven't even quite gotten to 80 yet. My goal is to get it down to 80. That's been really tough. And I've been really drilling down on this for at least 6 weeks now. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we're still understanding exactly what's going on. There's a scientist I've been following so I can empower myself and learn even more. I believe his name is Ben Bickman. I've
Hmm.
been following him on Twitter and his Instagram. He's amazing. He posts all these studies, and what he's researching regarding insulin is extremely interesting to me. So I've been looking to see how I can optimize my ketones and my blood sugar a little bit more than what it has been. I'm pretty happy with my numbers. I've never not been in ketosis. My blood sugar runs between 70 and 80, and my ketones are anywhere between 0.5 and 1.5 usually. I feel I'm a really efficient fat burner and that I'm utilizing the ketones. My body is utilizing them because I've been in ketosis for so long at this point that it's my fuel source. So I'm happy with those numbers because when I look at those numbers, I ask myself, am I getting a result? How do I feel? What's my body doing? And it's doing exactly what it should be doing. At the weight I'm at now, I can optimize my body composition even more by fooling around with the macros, I'm sure, and getting even more muscle definition. But I've reached a point, and when you're in a transformation, you have to ask yourself, when you reach a point where you're happy with your result, just keep doing what's working.
Sure.
It's like, I feel like people feel like they just have to keep going and going and constantly biohacking themselves, but I'm happy with my result. So I'm not going to change something, that's working for me. So now that I'm at the level that I'm at now, I try to, up my training and learn new things with training. But as far as my nutrition, I'm happy with how I feel. I'm happy with my body composition and how I look. I feel good about myself. So I'm not going to
Yeah, you're looking fit. That's for
Oh,
sure.
thank you. Yeah. So I'm not going to constantly be changing something that's working for me. So
Sure.
when you reach a goal, which I've reached my goal at this point, I tend to try to learn more regarding the science, learn more as far as weight training, different techniques. That's kind of where I'm at now in my journey. But I feel that people that are plateauing, and that this is a question I get all the time.
I can imagine.
There's a few reasons for it that I've noticed just through observation. And people that are really, really successful in a transformation and people that tend to plateau once they get that first initial result. And I noticed that I think it's important when you're following a ketogenic diet, especially if you're coming from a carb addiction or food addiction, which a lot of people struggle with. And there's no shame in that. Everybody struggles with it because of the mass amount of chemicals that they put in these foods that bind certain receptors in the brain that create addiction to certain foods, such as cheese, such as chocolate. So that the wheat, it binds the same receptors, a lot of them, as the opioids. So it creates the pleasure and you crave it. So in creating the fat bombs and the keto desserts, these can be used as bridge foods in combating addiction, and then gradually wean yourself off of the sugar substitutes, off of all of this. The people that tend to plateau and not get that result tend to stay on that keto junk food diet. So they're replacing one junk food diet for another, and then they're trying to supplement a keto junk food diet, and they're not getting the result that they're looking for because they're loading up on the sugar substitutes. They're loading up on, all these desserts and just eating them, kind of without really thinking, am I optimizing my nutrition? Am I giving my body the building blocks that it needs? And in eating all of these desserts, you're compromising your protein. You're not eating the protein and getting, the nutritional value and the nutritional profile that's actually in the meat. Because you're not going to, with what we know now, with what's in all this flax and almond flour,
Right.
With the high oxalates,
Right.
a lot of these materials that we use to bake these keto desserts are actually nutrient stripping.
Right.
So we're stripping away nutrients. And when we strip away nutrients, I believe a root cause of a plateau and inability to lose weight is actually a nutrient deficiency. Paul Mason spoke to this in a talk that he gave regarding iron deficiency, for example. You need these cofactors for your body to create energy, to do what it needs to do. And you need energy to be able to lose weight. You need energy for your immune system to work. So if you're robbing yourself of this energy source by eating a keto junk food diet, which can be nutrient stripping, you don't have the cofactors that your body needs to run optimally. And that can be a root cause, I believe, for the plateaus that we're seeing. And when people actually do blood work, some of the blood work comes back and you have deficiencies. So I think that can be a root cause for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people, they go on keto and they're like, oh, I can have all these desserts and I can have all of this, but it's at the expense of truly feeding your body a nutrient rich food source. And you're sacrificing your protein, you're sacrificing your building block with that. So that's a problem that I see in the community a lot. And I think it does come down to your substituting one addiction for another. And I always compare it to patients, for example, that have an opioid addiction. We use methadone or Suboxone as a bridge. But a lot of patients can't get off of the bridge. And it's sure. Something that manages it. So if the keto desserts are managing and you're staying on the bridge, but you're not getting over to the other side, then you're essentially managing an addiction. The goal is you want to walk across that bridge and get on the other side. But how to do that is a strategy that's different for everybody. And I'm not, judging anybody, because we all have our struggles, but it's an observation that I've noticed among people. So a lot of the people that I work with in my consulting and that I help are stuck on this bridge and they don't know how to get over to the other side of that. So I tend to help people develop action and strategies to kind of get themselves off the sugar substitutes and start substituting, a good protein source versus having a keto cheesecake.
Yeah, I could see that. So, staying on the bridge is kind of synonymous with staying in the plateau.
Yes. And I also believe that patients that have autoimmune conditions, staying on that bridge in a keto junk food diet, a lot of the foods that we're eating have toxicity to the gut. What we've learned, Dr. Saladino has been on every podcast known to man talking about this, can disrupt the gut barrier. We have the high oxalate foods that are actually incorporated into keto. So I believe that's also a route for, in my opinion, why some people aren't getting over that hump of autoimmunity. They're seeing some improvements with their weight, but they're still not feeling good.
Yeah, I can see that, especially if you're drinking like a fat coffee, a bulletproof coffee, and you're getting all that fat in. You can get too many calories because you can kind of bypass the satiety signal because it's in a liquid form. And then you take and add a sweetener to that, like a sugar alcohol, and you bypass the satiety once again because it's sweet. And then you make a fat bomb. Maybe that's sweet too. And you're eating fat. And then a lot of these things are coconut based, coconut oil based. And then, like you said, you throw in things like almonds and flax seeds, you can have high levels of phytoestrogen, and you can also have all kinds of phytates that are binding up nutrients. And come to find out, almonds don't just have oxalates in them, but almond in particular can be difficult to digest.
Yes.
So you might be putting something in that's causing digestive stress, but you're also not getting the nutrients out of it because it doesn't break down readily.
Right. So I think, in my opinion, two of the root causes that are barriers for keeping people in a plateau is, number one, nutrient deficiencies that aren't being addressed. And number two, the mindset of being stuck on the bridge and how do I walk across the bridge to get to the other side, just being, stuck there. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. And that's an issue that Chris and I are trying to help people with in our group, Mind Body Breakthroughs, which thank you so much for being such a great contributor to the group.
Oh, well, thanks
with
for
all your
having me.
content. We love that. So we have a mindset group where we do micro challenges every single month. We started with the carnivore diet because everyone was so interested in it, and gave our tips, and so many people contributed content to help people learn about it. And now we're focusing more on mindset challenges and getting over that bridge, because you can do all you want with changing your food and changing your fitness. But if you don't change your environment and curate your mindset and clear out all the clutter in your environment, whether it's emotions, whether it's stuff, you're never going to make room for all the wonderful abundance and health and purpose that's going to come in your life. So Chris and I are helping people with that. Our July challenge is going to be minimalism, which we're really excited about. So decluttering your home, or decluttering your car, or decluttering an emotion from your mind. We have an accompanying book that will be looking at the principles of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I used personally to recover from my back surgery, his mindset tips, to create a life where you clear out the clutter and you can bring into your life things that truly matter, such as meaningful experiences, finally starting your business, finally taking one step to walk over that bridge and not stay stuck on the bridge.
Fascinating. So that's coming up for next month, huh?
Yes, it starts July 1st. It's a free private Facebook group. We are a diet neutral group. So we do have people that follow all different nutritional aspects. We have keto, we have carnivore, we have vegan and vegetarians. We have people doing Whole30. We have people doing Atkins. It's all about peeling away the layers of everything that's not you, figuring out what works for you, where you feel your best and you have returned to health and purpose, because that's the goal. So it's a non-judgment group. We want everyone to feel safe to be able to contribute anything that they're struggling with. Food addiction is a topic. Severe life stress is a topic that a lot of times we don't talk about. And these are things that people truly struggle with. So as a group, our goal is to be the most positive group on Facebook. But when someone posts a struggle, there's no bashing. There's only strategy and solutions. And people sharing their N=1 stories and sharing their contribution or something that worked for them may be a key for somebody in their own recovery and their return to health and purpose. So that's why contribution is so important, and everybody has a contribution that they can make to the betterment of humanity and the betterment of the life of another person. So that's the culture that Chris and I are creating in our community.
Yeah, it's a very supportive group. The culture there overall is very supportive. I've noticed that right away. It's very much a very positive sort of trying to help everybody sort of environment. Yeah, very much.
Yes, because we have our community. We have people with terminal illness. We have people with spinal cord injury. We have people that have returned to health and now they're looking to return to purpose, that are starting businesses. So we'd like to have that mastermind component of business leaders in there that can help other people get to the next level of their business through advice and strategy. So that's important too, because there's enough abundance in the universe for everybody. So we don't have a culture of competition. It's a competition. It's have a culture of competition versus helping somebody get to the next level and being a key. So if you have a critical piece of information or strategy for somebody, offer it. There's enough abundance for everybody.
Yeah, no, I believe that too. I don't believe that we're in a zero-sum game. I believe there's enough to go around, and there's enough resource and opportunity for everybody to succeed. And a lot of that is just people sharing. Sorry,
Oh, no worries.
uh, People sharing ideas and people
Mhm.
mentoring and inspiring one another is definitely the key to help people take advantage of the opportunity of a bike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, is there any particular foods that you feel really affect people's moods?
I feel that a lot of the processed foods and junk foods that are out there can truly affect people based on hormonal balance, and also just if you're a sugar burner, you're going to have those crashes
Mm.
until you get refueled. So I truly believe that food affects everybody differently, and I don't advocate for one diet or another. Personally, I follow a carnivore diet. I feel amazing on it, and I'm happy to teach everybody, what I know about it so that they can find success with it. But I truly believe that it's not for everybody, and it's important to develop a great relationship with food to where you're living um, in health, optimal health and purpose, where you're happy in your life, and that's what matters. So as far as inflammatory foods, we definitely know, that sugar, grains, certain vegetable classes like the nightshades are more inflammatory than others. I think it all comes down to what the status of your gut health, overall gut health is, and what
Mm.
the status of your overall health is. Do you have a metabolic issue such as diabetes? Do you have cholesterol that's glycated with sugar? Do
Mhm.
you have severe high blood pressure? Do you have cancer? So all of these, questions, you know, you should ask yourself, and then look at the food you're eating and try to optimize from there. So I feel that each person needs to determine for themselves what works for them.
So, what are you eating these days? What's a typical day of eating for you?
Well, I went from steak and eggs because Dr. Sean Baker was my model when I first came to carnivore. So I
Mhm.
tended to look to see what he was doing and learning from him and resources. And now that there are other physicians advocating for the carnivore diet and have delved into the research, because if you go on PubMed, there's so much on there. It's so easy to get overwhelmed. And
Yes,
I
fast.
feel I feel that we have some really amazing people in science and medicine that are contributing to the carnivore and keto community, each in their own little niche and specialty. So I
Mhm.
tend to follow all of them, and I look to see what they're speaking to or issues that I would have never thought about. For example, Dr. Paul Mason, I never would have thought about iron deficiency, and Vanessa Spinner and I were talking about this on her podcast. I never would have thought a iron deficiency and a plateau. It wouldn't have been the forefront of my mind. Now that I've researched more on nutritional deficiencies, I could see that they're a huge root cause for a plateau.
Hmm.
So I tend to follow different scientists and doctors in the space, and I follow Dr. Paul Saladino. I'm a turbo nerd. I love science, so I love listening to everything he has and reading the papers that he references. So I've tend to evolve my carnivore diet into a little more nose to tail. So I eat salmon roe. I still do the steak and eggs. I add on. I've added on liver. I have my butcher slice it really thin, and I just fry it up in my cast iron with my eggs and
Mm.
eat it. I tend to do ground beef. There's three meat companies that I order from consistently that I really love, and I feature them on my Instagram. And I've been
Mm.
able to get some discounts for my followers for that, because I love saving people money.
Mm.
I do not use supplements at all. Uh,
Mhm.
I believe everything that you need, you can obtain in whole food sources. So to each his own with the supplement. I don't bash them. I feel that there is a functional role for them in severe deficiency in some patients, and they need to use that as a bridge while they're correcting their health. I personally do not use them. I don't feature them on my social media platforms because I don't personally use them. However, I do believe there is a functional role for them. I don't believe
Yeah.
that we have to, if we're in optimal health and we're eating a whole food diet, I don't believe that they're necessary. to, in all honesty, that's just my opinion.
Sure.
So I tend to just get everything that I need through the food. I do bone broth. I create my Instapot. You can do it in an hour and 20 minutes. It's gelatinous. It's delicious. I do that. I drink water. I do have a coffee addiction that I've had since pharmacy school. I like to have in the morning, I like to have a black organic coffee from Trader Joe's. I like the Colombian in my Keurig. And then I take either a teaspoon and a half of ghee, and I just put it in there and I blend it. And it's just delicious to me. I start every morning like that. Occasionally, I will cheat and go over to Starbucks if I'm having a very long day at work. I can walk over to the Starbucks and get a coffee. That's not a frequent thing that I do, but it is something occasionally. I would say those are my two non-carnivore things that I do. But I do. That's just how I start my morning. I feel good. It gets my brain going. I end up having a good workout after I drink it. So I tend to do that. And then I evolve. I do wild salmon. I try to eat my food sources that are grass-fed, grass-finished. That's my own personal choice when it's in my budget and when I can order from the meat companies and they have the grass-fed, grass-finished available in their boxes. That's what I tend to do. With that, sometimes there's not enough fat on them, so I use tallow. I use beef and bison tallow are my two favorites. I don't use butter, but I do use ghee occasionally. I do not use oils, the MCT oils or the coconut oils, based on some of the research that Dr. Paul Mason has done on that, and he's spoken to in some of his lectures where they can disrupt the gut permeability. So keeping my gut in optimal health is very important to me, because we've learned, and there was actually a paper, I'm going to put it on my Instagram, where plant lectins, there was a probe put on some plant lectins, and they went through the gut and were released in the gut through the vagus nerve and traveled to the brain and changed the size and shape of dopamine neurons. So I'm very conscious of making sure that I keep my gut health completely optimal, because the lectins or any type of substance that could potentially travel to my nerves could affect my nerves, and they're still healing up. I notice when in the winter, when my legs get cold, they go numb and I have nerve pain, and that's not normal. So I know my nerves are still healing up and they're still sensitive. So I'm very careful about what I put in my body. So I don't use any of the oils. I tend to eat everything from an animal source.
Yeah, that study, I believe it was a canine study where they tagged the lectins with the fluorescent molecule and they fed it to the dogs, and then
very interesting.
They saw it's like some sci-fi freaky stuff right there. Yeah, I remember that. And then I think that led to another study where they started investigating the role of lectins in Parkinson's disease.
Yes, that was the plant study. Actually, I would have to look at it again, because I just read it. It was where they hypothesized that the plant lectins could be a root cause for Parkinson's.
I have a little website called Carnivore Info, and I have many, many, many studies scrolled away.
Oh, nice.
I file everything by topic. I do
awesome
it way. So you'll find studies on like PubMed or PLOS One or something filed right in with a video on YouTube or a link to another. So you just click on a category and they're just all there, one right after the other. So when I come across these studies, one of the things you find out about, I have a group called Autistic Carnivores, and we have quite a few autistic adults who are very voracious researchers and readers. So we could have a day when there's 20 or 30 studies that get posted on one subject.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great resource. I'm gonna put that on my Instagram for everybody.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, it's not a very fancy website. It's just pages with links and links and links and more links. So
That's
I,
okay.
I was always having conversations with people, and it's like, okay, where was that study? What was it called? I don't remember. I'm dyslexic too, so I'm
Hmm.
not going to remember how something was spelled, or I'm certainly not going to
Yes.
remember a reference number or anything like that. So I started filing all that stuff in a conversational context that I
Mhm.
understood. So,
Yes.
and everything overlaps too, you know?
Absolutely. Everything is connected. Nothing is separate. Everything is connected. And that's what I've been trying to connect for myself and understand why I recovered and had this miracle. And other patients that have had similar injuries, similar diagnosis, similar time to surgery, did not have the outcome that I had. So I've been trying to connect everything together to understand this, to be able to help other patients that have been diagnosed with Cauda equina syndrome, or possibly be a key to somebody recovering from an illness and can get their life back. So that's the whole purpose of why I shared my story. But I feel that everything is connected. Nothing is separate,
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah, and I
sure.
wanted to circle back a little bit on the gut biome that you were referencing, because one of the things I think that I was causing a delay in the recovery in psoriasis, in my case, of course, would be leaky gut or intestinal
Mhm.
increased intestinal permeability, and I think it had to do with things like maybe MCT oil or supplements, because
Mhm.
a lot of supplements and medications and stuff like that actually have chemicals in them that help them pass
Right.
through the intestinal
Correct.
wall, and it can
Correct.
prevent that the tight junctures between the cells from
Mhm.
closing back up. So even though my arthritis went away, well, it's actually medication for arthritis that made my psoriasis that just go into overdrive. So,
That that is a amazing point that you just made, and I tell people this all the time, and thank you so much for bringing this up, because this is another root cause for people on keto and carnivore, for why their illness may not be clearing up. Number one, we talked about the supplement of the keto junk food diet with the nutrient stripping, the nutrient deficiency. And then also, um, you know, having a non-optimal protein and fat ratio, but also when you're supplementing and you're using all of these supplements, there are excipients that are in these supplements to help these drugs and these chemicals get across the gut barrier. It's in all medications because they need to be absorbed. So all
right.
of these are disrupting. So when you have the gap junctions open for a drug to go through or through a transporter, what else is hijacking these that are in the
Mhm.
gut that are going along with it? We don't
Slipping through the
know.
cracks.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But we do know that some of these excipients and chemicals that are put in drugs are put in them to optimize the transport of these drugs. And once they go through the gut or wherever they're absorbed, some of them are designed to be absorbed in the brain. What is
Hmm.
hijacking these
Right.
along with the drug? What is binding the drug? As far as food molecules that
Right.
are in circulation now because we have a leaky gut, we don't know. Uh,
Right. And even
yeah.
MCT oil or medium chain triglycerides, they kind of bypass the digestive tract and get shuttled right to the brain because it's a preferred fuel.
Right.
But what's going with it? What's
Right.
catching a ride? We're not sure.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great point that you just brought up. And I kudos to you for bringing that up, because it's something I feel that's not talked about enough.
Well, one of the things, and especially in autistic carnivores, oxalates comes up a lot because for whatever reason, autistic people tend to have very high levels of oxalates. So they seem to not be able to rid themselves. Their bodies aren't able to eliminate the oxalates the way most other people can. So it comes up a lot. And so we interact a lot with the low oxalate crowd, as
Mm-hmm.
it were, and they tend to be down, tend to complain about the PKD or paleo ketogenic diet and the folks at Paleo Medicina, because the folks at Paleo Medicina do not use supplements. And I think the reason why they don't use supplements is because of people like myself. They treat a lot of people with autoimmune disease,
Mm-hmm.
and the supplements tend to contain compounds that prevent the leaky gut or the
Yes.
increased intestinal permeability from healing. And
Yes.
so they're kind of at loggerheads over this issue of supplementation, because supplementation can really facilitate the removal of oxalates, but at the same time, it can activate autoimmune disease. So
Right.
I look at it and go, look, you can cure the autoimmune disease and then perhaps look at some supplementation, or you have to look very carefully at the supplementation, because even taking a magnesium tablet or something, which people commonly get leg cramps, especially if you drink caffeine. And I think that's one of the things a lot of people don't realize. It's not just that you went low carb, it's that you went
Mm-hmm.
low carb and you're still taking in lots of caffeine. And some people use caffeine supplements, and
Right.
they realize, oh yeah, I gave up coffee, but this caffeine is actually causing leg cramps at night, or I'm not getting enough salt or whatever. But taking a magnesium supplement is a common remedy for the leg cramps, and
Mm-hmm.
that in itself can keep the tight gap junctions open, right?
Right.
So
That's a great point. And Dr. Clemens from the Paleo Medicina has actually spoken to that in a few presentations and interviews. But it's not something that's, I believe, in the forefront of people's minds. In fact, I should create an Instagram post about it, because I've had that, and I talk to people about it all the time. I just haven't posted about it. So
mhm,
we should do a collaboration on that.
absolutely, I'm down
Yeah.
anytime.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and I'm so glad you brought that up. And hopefully, that's a key for somebody that watches this to look into as a root cause.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to go back just to touch on what you were saying about exercise too. I know I used to be a gym rat, believe it or not, before the arthritis and everything. And now that I go back and I do it, I do it a little smarter, obviously. Of course, we didn't have the advantage of all the content, online content back then.
Mm-hmm.
You had to go get a book or something. When you're
Yep.
dyslexic, you don't get through too many books too fast. But I noticed, you make the comment about the core strength. If you're
Mm-hmm.
doing overhead presses or something with dumbbells, you're going to have tons of core strength. If
Yes,
you just do something like push-ups, you're going to have lots of core strength, right? If you're
right,
sitting down on a Nautilus machine isolating every little muscle, you're not going to have any core strength.
right.
Yeah.
That's why I tend to train functionally. I don't use machines. I have a few stances that I get into, and
Mhm.
these stances help me engage my core. I have to engage my core, and that's what's helped build my strength in my muscles. It wasn't through sit-ups. Sit-ups are one of the most dangerous exercises you could do for your back. It was through keeping my back in neutral and engaging my core. So I'm constantly working my core every time I'm lifting and training. Uh, nature's medication for back pain is actually walking. There's a certain way that you can be walking, which is with your shoulders back, swinging your arms. It
Hmm.
takes the load off the lumbar spine to try to
Really?
move as quickly as you possibly can without being in excruciating pain. That also will help get the factors that you need, anti-inflammatory factors, to your back. Most people, after they walk, they notice they feel good for a few hours. It's constantly incorporating healthy, nutritious movement throughout your day rather than staying static and still. The back pain guidelines that came out, one of the worst things you can do when you have an injury is actually to just stay in bed for days.
Mhm.
Keep yourself moving the
Mhm.
best that you can. It tends to work its way out. There's actually, and I believe this isn't on audio, but this is Stuart McGill's book, Back Mechanic.
Hmm.
It's for the layperson. He also wrote some very high-level books called Lower Back Disorders and Back Fitness, which incorporates all the studies he's done with the back. But my functional training program and my rehabilitation program that I personally used with my physical therapist was based on his research for this. So I just wanted to give this to your viewers.
Mhm.
You can get it on Amazon. And he talks about how to walk. He talks about different movements that we do repetitively that could lead to injury. And then he also gives a diagnosis where you can diagnose yourself based on injury to reprogram your brain to pain-free movement. And it's basically teaching yourself how to move appropriately with your back. He talks a lot about keeping your back in neutral in everything that you do. If you have to pick up something, make sure you're hip hinging, not bending at the waist. So many of us have malnourished movement that we don't realize that we're moving in a way that could potentially lead to injury. We don't realize we're training at the gym and our form is compromised, because form is important to prevent injury. Our form is compromised because we're not engaging our core. So the two critical things to do to stabilize your lumbar spine is to build your glute strength and to build your inner core strength, to create what my neurosurgeon calls a muscle fusion. Rather than have a metal fusion, have a muscle fusion that keeps that spine stable to prevent disc herniation. If you have a bulging disc, there's exercises that you can do to get that disc back into place. So just because you have a bulging disc doesn't mean that's going to be a lifelong problem. Working with a physical therapist that's versed in functional training, and Stuart McGill, I highly recommend working with someone like that. They have functional strength trainers, certain certifications, and that's also based on Stuart McGill. So if you could find somebody that's a functional strength trainer, they can teach you how to go about fixing your back and correcting the muscle imbalances. When you first start, it's going to be uncomfortable, especially if you're out of shape and deconditioned. I always recommend build your endurance first and then start working on your strength. So even if it's just walking 5 minutes a day, that's all you can do, then break your day up to different increments of 5 minutes so that you're moving throughout your day. And over time, you end up building up endurance, and then you can add more on as you build your endurance.
Yeah, even a really big guy like Stan Efferding, who's like a professional bodybuilder, he just recommends people walk for 10
Yes.
minutes 3 times
Yeah.
a day. You know,
Yeah.
of course, his goal is hypertrophy, so he's not doing a lot of cardio, but he feels that's more than enough to sustain his, his basic level of fitness aside from muscle building. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be a lot.
I think a mistake that I would see, and I'd see this in the gym all the time, is people that were deconditioned and out of shape. They would come into the gym and start working, with a trainer, and I would see it. They'd be so discouraged within the first, part of their session, because they're doing all this CrossFit stuff and they're doing, all this crazy
Yeah.
lifting and burpees, and they're not conditioned. They have no endurance for it. So they get discouraged. And then I noticed just through observation, I'm like, I never see these people working with the trainer again. I never see them in the gym again.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And I feel, maybe before you hire a trainer, just start walking. When you build up your endurance with walking and you're doing it with great posture, you're pain-free, then maybe look into, hiring a trainer that will start training you functionally, so that you're training safe, that you're learning exercises you can do right in the home. Because a lot of these functional movements you can do right in the home. You don't even need a gym. And walking is free. Using your body for body weight exercises are free. You can
Sure.
work out in the home with minimal equipment. That's one of the
Yeah.
things I help people. Also in my community, I do little home visits with people that I know, and show them little workouts that they can do to get the result that they want. A lot of people I work with are coming from physical therapy because the insurance only allows, 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy. Okay, so you have your foundation, but how do you build on what you learned in physical therapy? What are the progressions so that you can continue
Right.
building strength and endurance and make this a lifelong habit? Because a lot of people make the mistake of, I just had surgery. I had back surgery. I had knee surgery. I had my 8 weeks of PT. Okay, I'm cured now. And then they go back to highly inflammatory diet, go back to malnourished movement, and then they end up having a relapse of their injury or a new injury, or end up having chronic back pain. It becomes a chronic condition. And the key is, when you learn your foundation, is to make that a lifelong habit and build on that and incorporate that into your day so that you can have a successful back surgery. Successful back surgeries are possible. There are people that have had successful back surgeries. Natalie Jill Fit is, she has a successful fitness brand. She had a massive disc herniation that required emergency surgery. I think she may have been at risk for Cauda equina syndrome. And she talks about the back. Sean Stevenson talks about the back. He deadlifts. Deadlifting is not safe for everybody. Just because one person does it doesn't mean it's safe for you. It's not safe for me because I don't have the flexibility for it, but there are other exercises that work the same muscles that you can do. So it's also working within the safety of what your flexibility and what your capability is as well. So that's where, the cookie cutter fitness programs can really hurt people. So I think it's really important. I really want to emphasize this to people that are just starting out in fitness. You don't have to be a rock star. A lot of people that have the six packs and are ripped, they've spent their whole life training. That's not something that's going to happen overnight. It could take you a few years to get that result.
Maybe decades.
Yeah, to build that muscle. I don't want to discourage anyone from, it's not going to happen for you. It can totally happen for you if you believe it, and you believe in yourself, you believe in your capability. You can make anything happen that you want in life. Anything's possible, but there's a safe way to go about doing that, and that's what I emphasize, especially with people that have had catastrophic things happen that required surgery that they had to recover from. But it has to be, a lifelong commitment that you make, because your neurosurgeon or your orthopedic surgeon have done the best job they can to get you up and moving and repaired. But you also have to take a responsibility as a patient that you're 100% responsible for your recovery after that surgery, and in putting in the work to make sure that you've recovered from the injury and that you're taking measures every day to prevent re-injury.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't that long ago. I was at a point in my life where I was pretty sure I was just a giant accumulation of injuries. I'd always had bad feet since I was a little kid, and I wore corrective braces on my feet when I was a little kid. And then I tore a shoulder somewhere along the way, and my back hurt all the time. And then I obviously have a pretty serious hand injury, and on and on and on. And I felt like I was able to do less and less. And then all of a sudden, here we are. I'm 48 now, and none of these things really bother me anymore. I've got one foot that bothers me part-time here and there, but it's almost, I think it's going to be all healed up and good to go here pretty soon. It's amazing. You can, don't tell me, but I got 3 GSWs on top of that. So, that's a lot. And then you get to the other side and you're like, wow, all of a sudden, just by changing the diet, changing the exercise. Well, like I used to do sit-ups and crunches all the time. And now I realize that for me and my goals, that was a complete waste of time, and it's the type of movement that's just going to irritate your lower back too, if you have a lower back issues.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So that's why I tell people, if you're struggling in an exercise, that's a beauty of fitness. And why I love it so much is you can figure out a different exercise that works the same muscle that's not causing you pain. And you build on that exercise and you build on the progressions from that. That's why I think a lot of people are set up and feel like failures, because they cannot keep up with the cookie cutter programs that are out there, because their bodies either don't move that way, they lack the flexibility, they lack the endurance, and they just set themselves up, for injury. So it's okay to be a beginner in fitness. It's walking is one of the best things you can do. Build up your endurance, and then properly look at your muscle imbalances, look at your posture, and start working on that functionally and building strength. And you'll reach your goals. It just may be a longer path or a different path than somebody else to reach those goals, but it is possible, and there is a safe way to go about doing that. That's why I'm so passionate about this, because I injured, part of the root cause of the injury in my back was in hindsight, I did not have the core strength to do some of the training I was doing. And I believe that that repetitive motion of how I was training in the gym was hurting my back. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I don't want to see this occur to somebody else. And if I had the knowledge that I have now back then, I would have obviously made changes. A lot of what I learned was through one way that I wanted to feel empowered in my situation when I was having trouble walking and learning how to walk again, and understand how to put together a fitness program, and learning all about Stuart McGill, is I got a NASM certified personal training certificate. And I did that to empower myself and understand how to start correcting muscle imbalances. And when I was studying that, I realized that I was improperly training before. So I made a lot of changes based on that. And I'm just so passionate about letting people know, about this, so that number one, they don't feel like a failure. And number two, that it's okay to be a beginner, and it's okay that your path in fitness may be different from somebody else's.
Absolutely. Well, take a minute to tell us about your group and whatever else you're involved in, and how people could get in touch with you.
Oh, sure. So I have a group on Facebook. It's a free private Facebook group, as well as a podcast by the same name with my friend Chris Donahue. He's the carnivore keto coach, and it's called Mind Body Breakthroughs. So you can send a join request, and we're happy to have you and look forward to your contribution and meeting you and learning all about you. My main platform that I love the most is Instagram. I tend to post a little bit about my life. I'm trying to get my face on there more, because people have told me they want to see my face a little bit more. But I mostly post about things that I'm reading about, things I'm interested in. I post a lot of my food. I get a lot of messages. So all my content is pretty much based on providing information or resources for people, because I'm here for you. I'm not here for myself. I'm here for you. Anything I can provide value or that may be a key to you in your journey, I'm happy to do that, because I read all the time. So I love creating content around that and my follower questions. I have a website called thepaleopharmacist.com, which I hope to work on today and finally get that refurbished with services. I do consultations, private consultations. With that, Chris and I are going to be offering some online courses. I work with price point to make it affordable for everybody. I have a keto bundle that I'll be coming out with, which is a 30-day meal plan, as well as home exercise routine. And it's along with a cookbook, and it's designed for people that are on the bridge and they're ready to walk over the bridge, but they need some bridge foods to help them combat food addiction, carb addiction. So it's designed to get them over that bridge. And then I also have a little carnivore guide that Chris and I are working on that we'll have out for people with that. So that's kind of what we have up our sleeve. We have a podcast, which we have a lot of exciting guests. In fact, we're interviewing William Schufelt today. And it's regarding strategy. So it's something a little different where we do talk about health topics and the science, but we talk to people that have had amazing transformations, have started businesses, have returned to health and purpose, and we talk to them and do a deep dive into their strategy. Exactly what did you do? When you had this barrier, how did you get over this barrier? What were some strategies that you used? So that we hope that people can take from these strategies a solution that they may be able to apply in their life to get them off the bridge that they're stuck on over to the other side. So that's pretty much what we have going on in the Mind Body Breakthroughs and at the Paleo Pharmacist.
Excellent. Well, be sure and send me over any links you want in the show notes.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Of course. Well, I think we covered it all. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I just wanted to thank you so much for your contribution in the carnivore community. I love all your videos and content, and I think you're helping a lot of people. So I'm excited for what you're doing. And Chris and I appreciate so much all your contribution in our group. I think people are learning a lot from you. So thank you.
Well, likewise. I think we basically have the same mission here. So Anyways, yeah, and so you're gonna have some tips on how to eat carnivore other than just eat a ribeye with a ribeye.
Yes, we're creating a little carnivore ebook for people. It'll be a cute little affordable book that people can download, and hopefully it will have a lot of commonly asked questions with resources and answers for people to get started and be successful. So we're really excited. We're working on it right now, and hopefully it will be a nice little comprehensive book for people.
Yeah, Sean Baker competes in that rowing competition, and that was here in Southern California. So I went down to the competition to see it and to meet him. I'm
Oh,
gonna tell
that's awesome.
that place was that was a building full of genetic freaks. I'm 5'11". I was the shortest guy in the room. I'm gonna
Oh
tell
my
you.
goodness.
Because when I first thought I saw Sean walk in, I go, well, that looks like Sean Baker, but looks too short. And then I realized the guy standing next to him was like 7 feet tall. I
Oh my
couldn't,
goodness.
yeah, he looked like a normal guy from the distance, but they were all just huge. And even the people that were like retired age, there were some guys in there. They were, they were not only tall, they had humongous shoulders. They had like professional bodybuilder
Oh
looking
wow.
torsos. Like I couldn't believe it. And of course, there's people from all over the world in
Mm-hmm.
there that came for that competition. So yeah, I always think it's funny because Sean just basically eats ribeye all the time.
Yeah.
Obviously, that works out for a guy with an insane amount of output every day because he's doing
Mm-hmm.
300 push-ups and he's rowing and he's hitting the speed bag or the body bag or whatever every
Mm-hmm.
day. But he's an individual on a completely different scale.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he's healthy. He's been healthy and fit for a long time. I think that's the other thing people miss because you can't really just out exercise the wrong diet,
Right.
especially when you're not already in shape.
Right. And body composition, in my opinion, and in my experience, is I would say 90% nutrition, what you put in your mouth, and then you optimize that the other
Yeah,
10% with training.
right. So and this point came up the other day when I was talking to Zach. We were trying to figure out, kind of working on like how people keep going or how people make the initial change or keep making changes. And the one common thing that we both noticed was you have to develop a level of curiosity. If I
Yes.
do this for a certain amount of time, how is it really going to affect me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems a little it doesn't seem to have as much substance as I'd like it to, but I
Mm-hmm.
really am starting to think that that is really the core of being able to change and to actually follow through is just that you have to have that internal curiosity.
Yes. Curiosity and initiative, and just start choosing differently in every situation. Take action every single day, even if it's a micro action. That's what Chris and I talk about in our group, because it's about not having a huge overnight transformation, because we know that that's an impossible thing for a lot of people. Very few people accomplish that, but breaking it down into little micro goals where it's 1% better every single day. We
Mm-hmm.
just, in our group for the carnivore challenge, we looked at the book You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, who was a Navy
Right.
SEAL. He was in 3 hell weeks. And he talked a lot about his mindset and how he overcame barriers. He had an accountability mirror where he talked in the mirror every day to himself, and he got raw and honest with himself. He started filling his cookie jar versus, things that don't serve him,
Mm-hmm.
with wins. His accomplishments. And then he would channel in his mind when he would get that defeatism mentality to get over that hump and overcome, like all the marathons that he ran, and scheduling time for success. And that wasn't an overnight process for him. That was something
No.
that took time, and to what he calls callous your mind. Callous your mind, build that strong mindset. So that's one thing too, is staying curious, but also callousing your mind and building that strong mindset, to take action every single day and showing up even when you don't feel like it, but showing up for yourself because you're worth it. Because if you don't think you're worth it, who else is going to think that you're worth it, right? So
Right.
you're worth it. Show up for yourself every single day. Believe in yourself. Most people, as he talks about, function at 40% capacity. Like they don't even realize what they're capable of.
Right.
And you're capable of what you believe you're capable of. And you may not have the skill set. Go out and put the time in and learn the skill set, get the skill set. The biggest thing that I always tell people is if you see someone doing it well and what you want, reach out to them. So many people love mentoring. Find yourself a mentor that's levels above you, that's going to challenge you, and show up every day. This isn't a comfortable process. Most people in leadership are not comfortable. You have to get used to being uncomfortable. I've been out of my comfort zone this entire year.
I can imagine.
I've started to become comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
So I expect to be uncomfortable, especially when I'm challenged at a higher level. I've been asked to speak at quite a few events next year, where I'll be speaking in front of my peers and high-level scientists. And, this is extremely uncomfortable to me. But I've put the time in to build my skill set, to build my knowledge set, to become a better public speaker. I'm transforming in public capacity. I put my story out there. I've been on podcasts. I'm a very shy person, so this is extremely uncomfortable for me. But going for it and putting yourself out there. And my number one piece of advice that was given to me by a boss babe in business told me, assume nobody is talking about you. Just assume nobody is talking about you,
Right.
and just go for it.
Right.
So that's pretty much, I focus on the people that I'm helping by sharing my story and my resources. I don't focus on negativity, and I just assume nobody is talking about me. That's my number one piece of advice. Start choosing differently. Get uncomfortable. It's okay. It's okay to be a beginner. Everyone was a beginner at some point, and just assume nobody's talking about you, and just go for it.
Well, that's inspiring. And that book by David Goggins was an amazing book.
Yes.
I don't know if you listened to the audio version, but put a lot of extra content in the audio version.
I'll have to get the audio version because a lot of people in the My Body Breakthrough group has messaged me, and they're like, Nevada, get the audio. Because I actually have his book right here. I have a whole stack of books because I'm an avid reader. So I have his book right here. So this is the book, guys.
The Garanimal himself.
Yes. Very inspiring man.
If you want another good audiobook, the one by Vinnie Tortorich, Fitness Confidential, it's hilarious. And the audiobook has a lot of extra content in it, like David Goggins' book does. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I will check that out.
You don't laugh out loud when you're listening to Vinnie, and Vinnie narrates his own book. So both those books are both inspiring and motivating for sure. So.
Oh, awesome. I will definitely check that out.
All right. Well, I think we killed it today. I know we must have been recording for over an hour by now, so it's amazing how it just flows sometimes.
I know. It was such a pleasure. I enjoyed so much coming on your podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh,
and
it was my pleasure.
I hope I added value to your listeners.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure people are going to love this and get a lot out of it. And I enjoy interacting with you online every day. So I really do enjoy your group that you have with Chris. So.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that.
All right. Well, I guess we better end this before it goes on all day, huh? I'm sure you got more interviews.
Thank you so much.
All right.